Danger DIY.
This is the culprit in me taking a blow to the face from a crowbar, and it really hurt. And the crazy part was, I wasn't even filming the repair at the time, but my Ring camera captured it. It is really embarrassing, so let's get on with it and get it out of the way so I can show you how to install a control arm and a new Bilstein shock absorber on my Mercedes W123. And I'll be sure to warn you not to do the same thing I did, which eventually led to me taking a crowbar to the face and not in a gentle way. Oh, wow, that hurts. So now that that's out of the way and I've had a little bit of a break, this video is going to show you how to replace the W123 control arm and the shock absorber. This is the left one already removed, and you can see it's in bad shape. It is shot. I've already finished the right side, so let's get to the left side and let's get this Benz on the mend. The first step is to remove the hubcap cover on the wheel so that we can get to the lug nuts. The hubcap is held on by 4 clips and just prise off. Once you have access to the lug bolts, unfasten them, pull the tire off the car, and get to work. This will expose the rotor and give you access to the suspension components. As we saw in the video, the bushing on this control arm is shot and it needs to be replaced. We'll need to remove the bolt that holds it at the back, the bolt at the union of the stabilizer, and the bolt connecting the tire. Now I'm also going to remove this aftermarket shock absorber and install a Bilstein shock absorber. The shock absorber is removed by unfastening the 2 bolts at the bottom and the one at the top that's under the hood. The bolt holding the control arm is under the hood, and fair warning, it can be a challenge to get off, but that is nothing compared to the challenge to get it back on. Ultimately, I prevailed. But be prepared for a fight to get everything lined up perfectly and pushing this bolt back into the control arm and through both mounting holes in the body of the vehicle. This took me over 20 minutes on both sides to get it done. Remove the old shock by untightening the lower bolts and by removing the 2 bolts at the top. The bolts at the bottom of the shock have a 10mm 12-point head, and you'll need a 10mm 12-point socket or wrench to remove them. A 5-sided hex nut socket will not work. Additionally, I will be installing new bolts when I install the replacement shock. My nuts on top holding the old shock are 14mm, but yours may be a different size, as the replacement nuts I have are larger and have a different thread size as well. Grip the bottom nut with one wrench while using a second wrench to loosen the top nut. After taking off the top nut, take off the bottom nut to complete disassembly. You'll want to replace the rubber spacer that sits between the top washer and the body of the car. You can see here there's a big difference between the old and the new, and I'm not 100% that these started out as the same size and thickness, but if they did, the old ones sure have compressed. Prepare the new shock by removing the top cover and adding a rubber spacing washer at the top before installing, and then putting back on the top cover. It'll now be ready to install. While you are reinstalling these bolts, you're going to have to adjust and move the shock forward and backwards on the hinge to access the heads to tighten each one, otherwise the shock will get in the way.
Ultimately, when you're done, you're going to compress it down and you're going to put it right back in the hole that it came out of. And I'm not going to be able to show you doing that because I'm going to be using both hands and I don't have a way to set up the camera. But basically it's going to be me grabbing it from the top with both hands, putting my weight down on it so that it's pushing down. It's going to compress the shock here. It's going to come down, and then I'm just going to move it over to that hole and feed it back up.
You are going to add a rubber spacer and the washer back, but then you'll see there isn't enough bolt threading to catch the nut. But don't worry. There is a solution, and what I did was use a floor jack to push on the suspension to bring the shock up so that I could attach the bolt and tighten the connection. I used a self-locking nut, but later I came back and added a second nut to double lock it. With the shock install complete, we are ready to remove and install the new control arm. I'll remove the bolts and pry out the old one. Due to needing both hands for this work, there isn't a lot of video of the uninstall or the install. It's basically the 3 connection points I've already shown and a lot of brute force to get everything off and back together, including if you need to pry off the part to remove it. One tool I found incredibly helpful, though, was an S-wrench during the removal and reinstall of the bolt holding the control arm to the body of the car. There was just so much other stuff in the way of these bolts that this S-wrench was a lifesaver. As I said, I didn't get a lot of video of the removal or install of the control arm. But to recap, it is removing these bolts and reinstalling them and using a lot of brute force to get everything back to where it goes. Now, I said I would give you a warning of how not to get hit in the face. So what happened is I released the shock and the control arm on the right side at the same time, and this caused the suspension to fall. Do not disconnect both the shock and the control arm at the same time, or nothing will be holding up the rotor, and it will fall to the floor and release the coil spring as well. Now, I am glad this job is done. My car rides great, and I know I won't have to do it again for a very long time, if ever. And I sure don't care to take a crowbar to the face again. If you liked the video, please give me a thumbs up and let me know in the comments what you think of my 40-year-old Mercedes. As always, thanks for watching my video. Please subscribe to the channel and have a great day.
Danger DIY. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications.